On the Jordan Harbinger Show, you'll hear amazing stories from people that have lived them, from spies to CEOs, even an undercover agent who infiltrated the Gambino crime family. You're about to hear a preview of the Jordan Harbinger Show with Jack Garcia, who did just that.
My career was 24 out of 26 years was solely dedicated working undercover. Now I walk in, I'm in the bar. Now there's a barmaid there, good-looking young lady. She's serving me a drink. Hey, what would you like? Usually my drink was give me a Kettle One martini, 3 olives, glass of water on the side. I finish the drink, the guys come in, I'm gonna go in my pocket, take out the big wad of money, bam, I give her $100. If you're with the mob, I say, hey, Jordan, you're on record with us. That means we protect you. Nobody could shake you down. We could shake you down, but you're on record with us.
For more on how Jack became so trusted in the highest levels of the Gambino organization, check out episode 392 of The Jordan Harbinger Show.
This episode of The Prosecutors is brought to you by Huggies Little Movers. Get your baby's butt into Huggies Little Movers. We got you, baby. I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are The Prosecutors. Today on The Prosecutors, we look at the defense argument for Pervis Payne's innocence. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of The Prosecutors. I'm Brett, and I'm joined, as always, by my mint co-host, Alice.
Not gonna lie, because of the accent, I'm not exactly sure what you just said.
Mint.
Like the U.S. mint?
Mint, like what goes in a mint julep, the finest bourbon drink that one
Did
can make.
Did anyone else hear mint with an E?
Mint.
Like not mensch,
we're saying the
but
same
a mint.
word. Mint.
They're
Mint.
different. Mint is a word.
Mint.
Meant is like I meant to
Mint.
say something.
Mint.
We are annoying so many of the one-star people right now, and I don't even care. I don't even care. You know why, guys? Because it's Maycember. It is the last week of school,
Maycember.
and the kids are running amok, and Mama has lost her mind.
She has. She doesn't even know what the word mint means anymore.
I was texting with Brett today, and I don't know what I was thinking. I just texted him something completely out of the blue, and he was like, what? We're in the middle of a conversation. I don't know what you just said. And I was like, me neither. I wasn't following our own conversation.
We did. It was like ships passing in the night, but not the Titanic, because the Titanic would have sunk. We talked about this before we
It didn't
started recording.
pass nothing.
So, all of that to say, we're talking about Pervis Payne today. Pervis Payne, last week, we sort of gave you the standard story in the Pervis Payne case, the prosecution case, one might say. I'm sure you left last week thinking this guy is definitely guilty. Well, today, we're going to bring you the other side. And this is kind of like being on a jury, because if you're on a jury, what happens? The prosecution gets up, they give their side first. You have a little bit of cross-examination from the defense, but then it's the defense's turn to stand up and put on their evidence for all the reasons the prosecution is wrong. And that's what we're going to do today. We are using the petition for clemency that the defense has put forward in the Pervis Payne case to explain to you why some of the things we talked about last week might not be as clear as you might think. So we're hoping that you guys, when you're armed with all the facts, can decide for yourself whether or not Pervis Payne is guilty of this crime. And just want to say again, thank you so much to the kids. We enjoyed meeting with y'all so much. I hope you're listening. You were great. You guys are going to do fantastic things in the future, and we can't wait to see you again.
I just have to say real quick, It's amazing how they aren't kids at Christ Presbyterian Academy. They really were like our cohorts. They were, I think, juniors and seniors, and it was so impressive the type of professionalism and rational thinking they brought to this case. So really appreciate you guys. I think you're already on summer break. Sorry it took us so long to record this episode, but maybe some, summertime listening for y'all.
Yeah, let me just say, we talk to schools. We like talking to schools. It's one thing to talk to sixth graders. It's another thing to talk to juniors and seniors. That is intimidating. I don't care who you are. Talking to juniors and seniors is intimidating, but they were awesome and they made us feel so welcome, and we enjoyed it so much. And thank you to them for turning us on to this case, and we hope we're doing it justice. And with that, let's get into the defense case for Pervis Payne. Now, this is an actual innocence argument. We're also going to talk a little bit about his intellectual disability and how that plays in, but really, Pervis maintains his innocence to this day, despite the evidence we talked about last time. And so we're going to go through what his argument is for his innocence. So, as we said, Pervis Payne, he did testify at his trial. And let's back up and talk about some of the things he talked about. He testified that he's going into this apartment building. And remember, there's sort of a door you open, and then you go up some stairs, and then you'll be at the apartment building that belongs to his girlfriend, and across from his girlfriend is the victim. So he testifies that as soon as he opens the front door to the apartment building, a, quote, black guy with long white, like a tropical shirt, kind of beige, he had just jumped from the second landing down to the steps and ran down past me real quick. Payne also said that this individual had short pants on, possibly just shorts, may or may not have been shorts. As the man rushed past Payne, he dropped items and loose change on the steps as he was running down the stairs. Payne stated that he picked up the items and the change the man had dropped and continued up the stairs to his girlfriend's apartment. Remember, he'd been going back and forth to the apartment all day. He never saw the man again. Payne not only testified to this, but he also relayed this information to police officers when they were transporting him to headquarters after his arrest. So this, if nothing else, has been a consistent story he's told. That he's, and I'm just going to keep going back to Murder, She Wrote, because this is a very Murder, She Wrote story. He is basically coming in as the murderer is coming out. He sees the person, doesn't think anything of it, and keeps going.
One thing to note here, remember, as Brett just said, and we said last time, Pervis has been going to his girlfriend's apartment, so going up these stairs, passing by Sharice's apartment 3 times that day already. And because he's been dating Bobby, he has been at these apartments many times over the past several months. And we talked about how this apartment complex really isn't a complex. There's 4 apartments, so only 2 on top, 2 on bottom. Very small collection of apartments. And he's saying here, I have never seen this person before. This isn't Pervis's first time at the apartment complex. He actually frequents it very regularly and very regularly that day. And that's something to note here, because if it had been someone that he'd seen regularly, you would think, knowing there's only 2 apartments up there, one of which is empty because Bobby's out of town, and the other one belonging to Sharice, and he's seen that apartment enough times not to have seen this person. He doesn't make any comments about the fact that he's never seen this person. He's never commented about having seen other men come down these steps before, but not this particular man. He doesn't comment about the number of people he normally sees or the lack of people who come down these steps because of the few number of apartments up there. This is all something to take into account as we think about his story and how it comports with perhaps the truth.
So here is a fact that is undeniable, and that's that there is really nothing in Payne's background before or since that is consistent with him committing this crime. Remember, what do you have to believe happened here? He went in, he raped this woman, he stabbed her children, killing one of them, almost killing another one, and then he stabbed her to death. At the time of his arrest, Payne had no criminal history. None. He'd never been arrested, convicted of anything when he was a juvenile or an adult. He had never been arrested. So if he did this, it was the first crime he had ever committed.
And that's no small thing, because obviously when you're investigating someone, looking into their background is one of the first things you do. And another thing that the defense claimed was that Payne had no motive to commit this crime. Prosecutors substituted a motive for dog whistle racism and portrayed Mr. Payne as a drug-addicted hypersexual rapist. That's exactly what his defense team argued before the Executive Clemency Board. Now, we've talked about how Pervis did not know Charisse, and he had no animosity towards her. They didn't have a dating history. They didn't have a sexual history, nothing like that. In fact, he seemed to be in a pretty good relationship with Bobby, the neighbor. Of course, rejected sexual advances can be a motive for rape, sexual assault, murder, and other crimes. But the defense claims there was, quote, no motive. It would be more accurate to say they did not think the prosecution provided evidence for their motive, rather than saying there's no motive, because, as we've said, we can imagine a situation where rebuffed sexual advances can lead someone to become very angry. We just don't know if that happened in this case. Additionally, the state does not have to prove motive anyway. This is kind of important and something that people don't always realize. The elements of a crime don't actually include motive. Motive is really helpful in telling the story because all of us, as we saw during the Murdaugh trials, want to know the reason why. In Murdaugh, the state did not have to prove why Murdaugh murdered his wife and son, but they provided one because it helps the jury connect these dots in their heads to believe something that seems unbelievable for a loving father to kill his wife and son. Same here. Even though the prosecution doesn't have to prove that there's a motive, it can always be helpful. So it's a bit of a red herring for the defense to argue that they didn't prove motive, since that's not actually an element of the crime. So instead of motive, the defense referred to, quote, dog whistle racism. And certainly some comments made by prosecutors appear to invoke some sort of racial imagery. What the defense said was that they emphasized the victim's white skin while talking about Mr. Payne's dark hand. So they're kind of drawing conclusions from the use of these descriptors. And the defense argues that there is no evidence that Payne was a drug-crazed super predator who sought sex with a white woman. They claim that the photographs of the crime scene show that the victim was wearing a one-piece romper, which was completely intact. And the prosecutor argues that the romper is pushed up. And they argue that the photographs and videos simply belie his statement. One thing to note here, though, I understand the comments about, wearing a romper. Those ladies who've worn a romper know it's a little bit difficult to get it off sometimes. But remember, a really key piece of evidence that the prosecution brought up was a used tampon next to Charisse's body. So whatever state her romper was in, or whatever her state her clothing was in, someone took out her tampon while she was on the floor in a stabbed, bloody mess, which can certainly lead a juror to believe that someone took it out in order to rape her. So the defense also claims that the prosecutor argued that after Payne, quote, looked at a Playboy magazine, his hormones got all out of control and he wanted sex with a white woman. And then they go on to argue that the evidence actually shows Mr. Payne was in the presence of two white women shortly before the homicides occurred, and he was acting normal and made no sexual advances towards those women. And because of that, there's no proof that looking at a Playboy is a trigger for rape. So the statement that there is absolutely no proof that looking at Playboy is a trigger for rape seems to be straightforwardly true, but that doesn't mean that there's no evidence that consumption of pornography is linked to rape or sexually aggressive behavior. And I don't necessarily think the prosecution was saying he looked at the Playboy and then murder filled his head. And that's what happened next. What they're trying to tell in this storytelling, right, is what led him from walking up the stairs with a bunch of beers and his overnight bag to committing this heinous crime and sexual assault.
And what I love about the law is the back and forth and the way that the different sides use facts to their advantage. And even if you look at this, you have a situation where, they're saying, well, he was in the presence of other women. He didn't do anything. Yeah, but was the circumstance the same? Remember what we have here. If he goes up, he's waiting on his girlfriend to get there. We have to assume that one of the reasons he's waiting on his girlfriend is because he's looking forward to seeing her for various reasons. She's not there. And then he sees Charisse lots of things could have happened in that circumstance, in a very isolated circumstance with just the two of them, that would not have happened with some other random women that he runs into. So I don't find this to be a particularly effective argument, but you can see how they're trying to make the argument.
Charisse is one woman with two young children who are helpless to defend themselves or her, whereas two women are two adults. We've always talked about how it's harder to rob, attack, rape, kidnap two people rather than one. This in particular is why we say the Delphi murder of two young girls is so extraordinary, because it is two people who can independently scream, can run in opposite directions, can claw and scratch the other while you're trying to subdue one. Doesn't mean it never happens, but I would say two women next to you is a different situation than one woman in an isolated apartment where no one is upstairs in that apartment complex.
Then the defense attempts to attack one of the pieces of evidence that Alice pointed to, the discovery of a used tampon. And here's what they say. The prosecution theorizes that Mr. Payne removed the tampon to rape the victim. There are several problems here. First, rapists do not stop to remove tampons. That is a bizarre statement to just throw out there. I mean, this is something they just throw out there as a fact with no evidence to support it. I don't know why you would say that.
I just don't think there's a study that shows that. Like,
yeah.
I'm sorry. I had to kind of gasp when I heard that argument, because it's such an assertion rooted in no fact. Certainly, I'm sure there's someone who's been raped who had their tampon in. And I'm also certain there are other situations where a tampon's been ripped out. And I've actually helped someone who's been in that second situation where someone they did not want to have sexual intercourse with removed a tampon.
Yeah, and look, tampons are designed to not just fall out. And women, I think I'm pretty safe in saying women don't typically remove their tampons and just drop them on the ground. So the fact that there is a tampon found there is indicative of a rape and the removal of the tampon. Now, they then do something you see a lot, which is attack the police, attack the way the police did things, and you're going to see that a lot here. But I think this is actually a really good example of defense attacking the police in a way that makes no sense. So remember, we're talking about tampon here. So here's what they say. Second, the tampon was not collected until 2 days after the crime. It is not visible in any photograph of the crime scene. It's not visible in the crime scene video. It was not noted by the crime scene personnel. It is not included on the hand-drawn map of the crime scene. Okay, guess what? They didn't plant the tampon. Like, I think if there's one thing we can be absolutely sure about this crime, they didn't plant the tampon. And if anything, what you've done is you've proven that the fact that the police don't necessarily document the scene very well doesn't mean that any evidence that is not in the documentation doesn't exist. The tampon absolutely existed. No one would just make that up.
And for anyone who may not be familiar with tampons, they're going to be about the size of your thumb, okay? In other words, pretty small. And we're talking about an incredibly bloody scene. Guys, I'm going to say something disgusting. The tampon, if used, is going to be bloody. But remember, 3 people have been viciously stabbed, and the entire scene is bloody, and there's going to be stuff all over that crime scene. I'm not surprised that crime scene photos and documents didn't draw in a used tampon that probably blended in with the bloody scene around it.
The defense goes on to say, the person who allegedly discovered the tampon is the same man who initially confronted Mr. Payne. He testified that Mr. Payne used the words, "I am the complainant." We know that is not true. No one talks like that, certainly not an intellectually disabled 20-year-old. If the witness would lie about what Mr. Payne said, he is willing to tell other lies. Further, when the tampon was recovered 2 days later, it was not photographed. We only have the say-so of the officer who allegedly found it at the scene. Once again, they didn't plant the tampon. I can't believe anyone would make that argument, and frankly, it weakens your argument to include it. And I tell this to young lawyers all the time. If you're trying to make an argument that's obviously absurd, don't make the argument. It just makes everything else you say weak. The tampon absolutely was there. Now look, did Payne say, "I am the complainant"? Probably not. When the guy was writing the report, did he use like police lingo, as police often do? Yeah, he probably did. Does that make him a liar? No. Does it mean that he's lying about the tampon? Absolutely not. I think if there's one thing we can say absolutely happened in this case is they recovered a tampon. And look, whether Pervis Payne did it or not. If it was someone else who raped her and murdered her, they would have done the same thing. I'm not even sure why they're fighting this battle. It seems like a very strange hill to die on.
And the defense went on to say that the fourth piece of evidence that the prosecution used to insinuate a sexual motive was the testimony of criminologist Paulette Sutton, that acid phosphatase was present on the vaginal swabs, but that result in and of itself means nothing. Remember, the result wasn't that there was semen, but there was acid phosphatase, which is found in semen, which is, by the way, how medical tests are done. And they said that there was no sperm present in the vaginal swabs, and the victim was sexually active. Her boyfriend, Daryl Shanks, has given inconsistent accounts of whether the two had sex the night before the murder, but they were involved in a sexual relationship. And the medical examiner observed no evidence of sexual trauma. Now, the vaginal swabs are missing, and likely they were destroyed, but there is no paper trail, no report, or chain of custody. And they also go on to argue it's important to note that there is no sign of forced entry, but Mr. Payne and Ms. Christopher were not acquaintances.
Which, can we just say, is not true? They absolutely knew each other and seen each other. In fact, Pervis Payne said that he had seen her and her kids and had been around her and her kids before. Like, it is silly to even make that argument that they were not acquaintances. Pervis Payne is one of the few people that we know of as a suspect who probably could have said, hey, I've seen you before. I'm waiting on my girlfriend to get home. Do you mind? It's hot out here. Do you mind if I come in? I mean, just a silly argument. And once again, there are good arguments for Pervis Payne. These are not them. And also, let me just say, I get it. You got to argue for your defendant and your client, but making arguments that are akin to some of the arguments you see when someone is accused of a rape, like there's no evidence of sexual trauma, there's often not evidence of sexual trauma in a rape. That doesn't mean there wasn't a rape. And I don't know, this is the most distasteful part of this argument for clemency. And look, when you're making an argument for clemency, avoiding being distasteful is really important because you're not in front of a court anymore and it's a different setting. You're trying to convince someone to essentially say your guy's innocent outside of a court setting. So I get it. Defense attorneys often have to make distasteful arguments when they're defending people who are accused of rape. I get that. That is not the circumstance. And I don't understand why some of this was included in a clemency petition.
Yeah, it really does make my stomach turn whenever I see defense counsel argue there was no sexual trauma, because that can be indicative, but it certainly is not required when there has been a sexual assault. And remember, again, the situation that Charisse was in. She was with her 2 young children. We don't know if the children had been stabbed, if she had been stabbed, if her children were alive and watching her. Does she want their mother to be screaming and clawing at a man? I mean, she may be in complete shock. She may be thinking about her children so as not to be kicking him and making it essentially worse. Maybe she's thinking he'll take what he came for and he'll leave us all alone. There are so many things that can go through a woman's mind as they are in the worst situation possible. And sometimes that means I will suffer this hell, sexual assault, if that means my kids can get away alive or I can get away alive. If I scream, he'll probably hurt me or my kids. Let him do what he came to do and get out, and then we'll all survive this. So you never know what the victimology is here, and we'll never know because she is dead. So moving on, the prosecution alleged that Payne was found with a pony pack. Remember this pony pack thing? Which contained white residue in his pockets. For those of you who may not remember from last time, a pony pack is not like a fanny pack. It is to hold drugs. So it's a drug pack. And it did have white residue consistent with drugs. And in fact, it was tested positive for cocaine and a syringe cap. However, no track marks from injecting drugs were observed on his body. Furthermore, testimony and affidavits from friends and family indicate that Pervis had, quote, no history of serious drug use. Of course, this was part of the argument by the prosecution that Pervis was high on drugs or on some substance, maybe he had been drinking, and so he was doing something out of the ordinary of what all his friends and family are saying he's incapable of. The defense here is saying, you don't even see track marks. So there's no way he could have shot up on cocaine or otherwise have been inebriated. The defense then go on to say, confident in the lack of drugs in his system, Mrs. Payne begged officers to run a drug test on Pervis. Now, they refused, and Mr. Payne's mother begged for a drug test the night of the murder. Again, the police refused. Common sense tells you that if the police believed he was on drugs, they would have tested him, and that exculpatory evidence was lost forever because of law enforcement's actions. Real quick on this, they already know a woman, and one child is dead with another one who might be dying very soon. Whether he was on drugs or not doesn't go to whether he killed him or not. So that is, it's not an essential part of the investigation. What they have are 2 dead people on their hands and a third one in critical condition in the hospital. Drugs is like, honestly, an afterthought. Whether he was on drugs or not, if he killed them, he's guilty of it. That's not an actual innocence argument.
So I'll go on to read some of the things they said about this, and then I'll tell you what I think about the drugs. They go on to say, the state claimed that they found a white piece of paper in Mr. Payne's front pocket, which tested positive for cocaine on an unreliable field test. No report of the field test was made. No photograph of the piece of paper exists. 2 weeks before the trial, the DA's investigator took the paper from the evidence room to the University of Tennessee at Memphis. This person testified at trial. He claims the paper had been sent to the TBI previously. There's no report from them. Holst describes the paper he took as testing as blue. The prosecution received a report that the paper tested positive for traces of cocaine, but does not quantify the amount detected. No lab notes or bench notes exist. No photograph of the paper exists. At trial, the paper had vanished. Just 2 weeks after testing, the paper remains missing. There's no evidence that Mr. Payne injected drugs. There are no photographs of needle marks or track marks, which would be expected on a person who used IV drugs. No witness testified that Mr. Payne had ever used cocaine. So let's talk about this for a second. Number one, when your argument is the police didn't do a thorough job of investigating, when you then rely on the fact that they didn't do a thorough job of investigating to disprove something that's bad for your client, it loses a little bit of its impact. Did the police do all these things? Did they take pictures of track marks, to do drug tests, or all this stuff? Probably not, because frankly, they found a guy covered in blood, leaving a place where people had been stabbed to death, and they probably were lazy. And I give you that 100%. That is not proof that he wasn't on drugs. I am going to go out on a limb and say that if you tested every piece of paper in my house, you would not find a positive test for cocaine. The fact that they tested the paper and it came back positive for cocaine and that they found the syringe cap means, most likely, he was taking cocaine. Whether or not that means he was involved in the murder or not, he was taking cocaine. And this is another one of those places where it's like, I guess why you're arguing this, but your argument is very weak because it doesn't seem to comport with reality. And just note, you'll see this a lot when you see these innocence claims, because what are they saying? They're not saying we can prove he didn't use drugs. You know, his mom really wanted him testing for drugs. Did Pervis ask to be tested? Because kind of interesting if he wasn't saying, yeah, test me right now. They don't say that, right? You know, the man who would know better than anybody whether there's going to be drugs in his system. And his mama doesn't think he used drugs. He's not standing up and screaming, test me. And what you see is not proof that he didn't do it, but just proof that the police didn't do a good job of documenting it. They say it's exculpatory evidence because they didn't test him. It's just as likely that they missed the opportunity to get some inculpatory evidence. If they had tested him, we don't know that the result wouldn't have been that he, in fact, did have cocaine in his system. But given what we do have, it's more likely that he would have had than that he would not.
And this is what's great. Because they didn't do the test, the prosecution can make this argument. But if they actually tested and it likely came back from cocaine, they're like, well, there goes that argument. And here's the other thing. Note that they're not saying that Pervis Payne doesn't have track marks. It's very carefully worded in the clemency application. They say that the police didn't do a good job because they don't have photographs and evidence of track marks. That is different than saying Pervis Payne doesn't have track marks, because guess who is present at trial? Pervis Payne. Guess who can pull up their sleeves and show the parts of their body that track marks are typically found in and show the jury that track marks are not present. They don't need photographs or evidence from the police to show that point in court. And here's another thing. Track marks, this is kind of like the sexual trauma thing for sexual assaults. It's not all the time. There are a lot of places you can inject cocaine, and track marks certainly are indicative of abuse because you inject yourself so often that scars form where you typically inject yourself, but they don't form after several times of stabbing yourself with a needle. They form after like intense levels of abuse. And when it becomes difficult to inject yourself in certain parts of your body because you've injected yourself so often in those veins, you find other parts of yourself, like the backs of your knees, for example, that are not the first places that people think of as having track marks. So this time he may have injected by syringe. There are multiple ways to take cocaine, as you all probably know. So in this particular instance, he was found with a syringe cap. Doesn't mean that's the only way he ever took cocaine. He may have snorted it. He may have done other types of drugs that didn't necessarily need a syringe. So this argument is kind of trying to weave past a lot of other arguments, but I don't find it particularly compelling. The defense then go on to say that they've had all this exculpatory evidence that's been lost because it was not collected or is destroyed. And this is a repeated theme they kind of keep harping on. They said the most valuable evidence, which is fingernail scrapings, which the state confirmed existed in writing on July 29th, 2020, has vanished with no explanation. They said that we know from the testimony that the bodies of the victims and the furniture in the apartment were moved before any photographs or video were taken. No blood samples were taken from the scene. Blood was observed on the sink and toilet in the bathroom, and the handles on the sink and toilet were not tested for fingerprints. Given the amount of blood on the floor, there should have been bloody footprint impressions, but none were photographed or documented. A folded pair of adult glasses that did not belong to the defendant or victim were found next to the victim's body, but no attempts were made to identify the owner. The defense also claims that the police said they had to borrow their chief's personal color camera to take photographs because the department did not own one. Inexplicably, they claim they forgot to put film in the camera. So these are some of the arguments they've made about evidence that could have been exculpatory that was lost.
And I mean, this is typical stuff, and it's not out of bounds for them to make these claims because oftentimes, in fact, basically in every case, the police don't do everything. They do things they shouldn't have done. They don't take steps they should have taken, particularly at this time. I would like to think we've gotten better at preserving the scene, and we've gotten better at documenting the scene. And so a lot of times you see these old cases, and you see a lot of mistakes that just seem, man, what were they thinking? And these are legitimate claims, you know, unlike some of the other ones. I think these are legitimate claims. The police should have done a better job. They didn't do a great job. You know, they wanted to take color photographs. They forgot to put film. That's not inexplicable. They literally just forgot to put film in the camera. These things happen. And so we don't have the evidence that they would have liked to have.
I think it's actually a little more compelling that they forgot to put film in the camera because they just didn't even have a color camera. They're like being attacked for not having enough funds to have these sorts of devices. This is the 80s. And so they're more being attacked for not having the resources to have like every potential device, which again is kind of based on tax dollars. And they still tried to work around it, right? They're using their personal devices to work around the fact that their department doesn't have one. So I get what they're trying to do here, but again, it's not showing like malice on the part of the police department, but rather lack of resources, which is something that is not foreign to police departments.
So they also tried to point out that there could be issues that are more significant than that. And like in the Adnan Syed case, they have some handwritten notes of the prosecutor that they try and focus on. And these notes, they are hard cues, so hard questions. And they write down some of the things. They talk about the 3 beer cans, and there's a note that says, did police plant them? Look at pictures. And they say the scratches on him, Boswell saw them. They note that there were drips of blood on the floor. Why not submitted? And they say, screwed up, didn't want to use, not found. Then they say evidence receipt, fabricated, beer cans, not found where claim. Now, here's the thing. This prosecutor is making these notes, and they're hard. He notes them as hard questions. it is impossible to know what was in his mind. But I will tell you what would be in my mind if I was writing this, would be the hard questions that the defense is going to ask at trial. So I would be trying to figure out what are the things that the defense is going to attack. What are the hard questions they're going to ask of my police officers, of my witnesses, in an attempt to trip them up. And I would want to come up with those hard questions and address them. It does not mean that this prosecutor believed that this stuff was planted or that this stuff was fabricated. What it means is the defendant and the defense counsel is going to attempt to ask those questions of the police, and we need to be prepared for that. That's the way I interpret this. I don't think this is they thought all this happened, because if that's what they're saying, then you've got to wonder if the prosecutor's in on it, in on framing him. Why would they even be concerned about this, right? The only reason they would write this down is if they wanted to be prepared for trial where these things would come up. So that's what I think is happening here. Obviously, the defense is going to paint it as even the prosecutor recognizes that there was probably planted evidence in the case. And this is why this is important. There's so much evidence in that room that is damning to Pervis Payne. The only way around it is to say it's planted. Take the beer cans, right? So you got the beer cans, which he admits to buying, they have his fingerprints on them. He claims that he left them outside. They're found inside the apartment. The only argument he can make about that is that the cops planted it. That has to be his argument. That has to be the thing that he is going to say. And if you're any prosecutor worth his salt, is going to understand that that is going to be the attack made by the defense, and you're going to want to be prepared for that. The defense goes on to say, Mr. Payne has always maintained that he purchased 3 cans of beer. He opened one and the other 2 were in the bag. He left the open beer can in the bag with the other 2 beers on the landing outside Bobby Thomas's apartment when no one was home, which I'll just tell you, as someone who drinks beer, it's very strange to me that we just open the beer and leave it in the bag. Personally, I would drink the beer, but whatever. Later, when he ran from the scene, he grabbed the bag in his overnight case. The open beer can spilled and soaked through the bag, which broke, and the beer cans fell out as he was running. This is what he says. This notion that what actually happened was these beer cans were relocated to the apartment. I mean, okay, I guess that's a possibility, and you basically have to believe that. You have to believe that he did that. One thing that I think is very strange that the defense argues, and I'll quote it, is there's no proof that Pervis Payne purchased 4 beers. Detective Wilson did not mention finding beer cans in the apartment in his report. Another thing they did not do was go out to the store and buy a 4th beer to plant in the apartment. If there were 4 beers, he bought 4 beers. Now, maybe they took the cans from outside the apartment and planted them in the apartment. That might have happened. But what they didn't do was buy an extra beer. If he says he bought 3 beers, he's lying. He bought 4 beers. And those beers all ended up in the apartment, either because he took them in there as part of this ruse to sort of hang out in the apartment while he waited on his girlfriend to come home, or because they were planted by the police. Guys, being an adult, it has its high points. You can eat all the ice cream you want, or the thing I always wanted to do, just be able to buy all the candy in the store and eat every single piece of it. But when you do stuff like that, you know what you're going to need? A doctor. And that's where ZocDoc comes in. They make it so much easier to find a doctor for you. I can tell you, I was looking for a doctor recently. I'm not getting any younger, and I do like to eat candy. And ZocDoc made it so easy to go online and to see which doctors were available, which ones were taking new patients, and which ones took my insurance. It made life so much easier, and it made one of the parts of being an adult that you don't really like so much less of a pain.
ZocDoc is a free app and website where you can search and compare high-quality in-network doctors, choose the right one for your needs, and click to instantly book an appointment. We're talking about in-network appointments with more than 100,000 healthcare providers across every specialty, from mental health to dental health, eye care to skin care, and much more. Plus, ZocDoc appointments happen fast, typically within just 24 to 72 hours of booking. You can even score same-day appointments. So stop putting off those doctor's appointments and go to ZocDoc.com/prosecutors to find and instantly book a top-rated doctor today. That's ZocDoc.com/prosecutors. ZocDoc.com/prosecutors. Guys, I'm so excited to talk about one of our favorite sponsors. EarthBreeze Eco Sheets look just like dryer sheets, but it's ultra concentrated liquidless laundry detergent. It's the best of all worlds. EarthBreeze is tough on stains and odors while being kind to the planet and your skin. You guys know I have a whole gaggle of kids. Gaggle of kids means lots of stained clothing. I'm doing laundry literally every day, and my kids have sensitive skin. I don't have to worry about that with EarthBreeze because their eco sheets are dermatologist tested, hypoallergenic, and free of bleach, dyes, and parabens. They're also a fragrance-free option that I use. And EarthBreeze got rid of unnecessary chemicals for a formula that is kind to sensitive skins of all ages, including babies. And the best part is there's just no more heavy lifting or measuring sticky blue goo from a massive plastic jug. Rather, EarthBreeze's lightweight cardboard packaging takes up a fraction of the space in your laundry room versus traditional detergent. For someone who has to do laundry all the time, I love that EarthBreeze is changing the way I do laundry.
And the thing about EarthBreeze, it's not just good for your skin. It's not just an easier, more convenient option. It's not just good for the environment. It gets your clothes clean. They will smell great, and you will feel like you're actually doing something good for your family and for the planet. Right now, our listeners can receive 40% off EarthBreeze just by going to earthbreeze.com/prosecutors. That's earthbreeze.com/prosecutors to cut out single-use plastic in your laundry room and claim 40% off your subscription. earthbreeze.com/prosecutors.
Another argument by the defense is that there's a photo showing Payne's hat underneath, remember, the toddler Lacey's arm. And they said that picture was staged. So another thing about things being planted. Specifically, there was testimony that Lacey was face down when officers arrived, but in the photo, she's face up, and that officers testified they placed the hat under her arm before taking the photos. What is actually said, so Officer Owen, remember, was the first officer in the apartment, and she testified that the little girl was laying face up when he entered the apartment, and she was later turned over. So it's the opposite of what the defense are arguing. This is from the trial's transcript. It said, question, the second body was that of a small girl. She was laying on her back against the east wall of the kitchen. Do you remember making that statement? Officer Owen said, no, sir, but if that is what I said, that's the way it was. Yes, sir. When you went in and first saw the scene? Yes, sir. So the little girl at this point had been turned over onto her stomach by someone? Yes, sir. Do you know who did that? No, sir. I don't have any idea. Oh, sorry. It's just tough thinking about these little girls sitting in pools of blood. Now, there's also a photograph of Mrs. Christopher face down and another of her face up. Now, the majority of the photographs which I have viewed are of Mrs. Christopher face up and Lacey Christopher face down. The photographs do not have timestamps, so there's no way of definitively proving which photo was taken when. Really quick, I have no doubt that all the victims in that room were turned at some point, because you have this bloody scene, you have people who might be able to be saved, and in fact, thank God, one of the toddlers was able to be saved. The first thing they do when they come in, they're not trying to preserve the evidence, they're trying to save lives. So if they didn't turn over people who were face down, I would be actually surprised. So the fact that they turned at all is not shocking at all. I don't think that's tampering with the evidence. Those are life-saving mechanisms that you would absolutely expect in any sort of a crime scene. That is a very different argument, whether the victims were turned at any point, than if you planted evidence in a picture. I've heard no testimony in trial that has to do with planting of the hat, which, by the way, remember, Lacey's arm was through it, just that they were turned or that there were pictures that showed them face up versus face down. That testimony in my mind, does not go at all to whether evidence was planted to make it look like Pervis Payne's hat was in those pictures. And if you read the testimony, it's all about face up, face down, and having pictures of both, not whether the hat was actually put there by anyone. There was no testimony by Officer Owens or any other officer who said, right, before I took that picture, I placed a hat that was not currently in the room underneath the victim. Why? Because I wanted to make it seem like the owner of the hat committed this murder. There is no testimony like that, though the argument by the defense is such that. They also say the testimony is that the bodies were moved. I agree, by the way. And Officer Owen clearly stated that Lacey Christopher was lying face up when he came into the residence, and he was the first person present, but the hat is not as described by the prosecution. There is no report that indicates that the hat was under the little girl's arm. This was new testimony at trial. So even under the state's theory, the hat had to have been placed under Lacey's arm for purposes of photographs. Know how this argument takes place. The argument makes a leap of conclusion. It's saying that Officer Owen said, I saw Lacey face up. And he didn't during that part of the testimony, because, by the way, the question never asked about the hat. He didn't describe a hat, but he later on says there was a hat. And because he talks about the hat at a later time, the defense is then making that leap of conclusion to say, because he didn't mention it in the very first instance, the hat must have been planted. That is a huge leap of logic that actually, I don't think really has basis in the evidence. So it's
how'd they get the hat?
So maybe they could go buy a beer can, but where are they going to get his hat?
Yeah. Like, if you're assuming they're framing him, remember, he's run, he's gone. I mean, I guess the theory is that while he's running, his hat flew off, and they took the hat and brought it up there and planted it. I mean, this is a thoroughgoing conspiracy. I mean, this is not Adnan Syed level of conspiracy. This is just taking evidence that was around the area and putting it in a place where it frames the person, which is believable. I'm not going to tell you it's not. This is a conspiracy that could have happened. But there's no good explanation for how they got the hat and to put it where they put it. And frankly, does it matter whether it was underneath her or on her arm? I mean, either way, the hat is problematic. Or just in the apartment
at all.
Yeah, right. So I don't know. This is one of those where I promise you this is going to get better, but this is one of those where this is damning. The presence of the hat in the apartment is damning, and you have to believe that the police found the hat somewhere else and placed it in that apartment. And that is a much bigger story than the hat got moved from the general area of the little girl and somehow ended up on her arm. That's not great. I mean, you want everything to reflect the state of the body when it's found. That's bad if that happened. But moving from sort of underneath her body to on her arm in the process of her being turned over, that is nowhere near as damning as they planted the hat. So you have to believe that that hat was planted. Now, the blood evidence. This is a better argument. The blood evidence, the defense will say it does not match the police theory. Let me read you some of what they say, because I found this to be more compelling. Photographs and physical observations of Pervis Payne's pants reveal very little blood. Even the blood on his shoes is minimal considering the blood at the scene. Mr. Payne admits he touched the murder weapon and cut himself. That he has some blood on his clothing is unsurprising. The small quantity of blood, however, is consistent with his story that he tried to help. This is good, right? Now look, him pulling the knife out of her throat will always be something that strikes me as unusual. Him managing to cut himself while doing that, also unusual. It's one thing to cut your hand when you're stabbing someone and there's this violent stabbing motion. It's another thing to cut your hand accidentally on a knife. I mean, I handle knives all the time. I don't typically cut my hand. But he's saying it happened then. Okay, whatever. The fact of little blood is more compelling, and I'll continue to read from this. The force involved with the stabbing would produce medium velocity spatter. None of the clothing has medium velocity splatter. Transfer blood is larger in diameter. In addition, there's very little blood observed on Mr. Payne's clothing. Please take note of the TBI serology report available. Most of Mr. Payne's clothing had too little blood to test. It should be noted that we have no record of how the clothing was handled or packaged. In other words, we do not know if the detectives preserved the items separately or threw them in the same bag together. We do not know how many people had access to the clothing. He goes on to say it wasn't preserved. It is not known if the police retrieved the clothing from the funeral home. Standard police practice would have been to place the clothing in evidence at autopsy. There's no record of that happening, given the amount of blood at the scene and the likely protracted struggle. It is inconceivable that Mr. Payne's clothing would have so little blood if he were the perpetrator. And they also claim that the blood that's on his pants is more consistent with him kneeling down to remove that knife from Sharice's chest than it is from some sort of murder. And they include photographs of his pants, and they're black, so it's hard to tell, but there's not a whole lot of blood on there. So this argument is a little bit better. You would expect him to be covered in blood. I will say this, he does have the issue of having both Nicholas's type A blood on the knees of his pants, which is not consistent with his story, because what he says is he knelt down in front of Sharice to remove the knife, and that's where the blood came from. Her blood's type O, not type A. So if it came from kneeling down, you would expect it to be type O. How that type A blood got on his knees, hard to say. And you also have the problem that the police who did observe him said that he had a lot of blood on him, including Officer Owen testified in trial that he appeared to be sweating blood.
And also you have the fact that, remember, he ran from the police and was in hiding for some time with a bag of overnight clothes before they arrested him. So we don't actually know the amount of cleanup, but he had time, opportunity, and the means for cleanup because he literally had an overnight bag with him.
Right. And I think this is their best argument, that he doesn't have quite as much blood on him as maybe you would expect, but he still had a lot of blood on him. So it's not as if he didn't have any blood on him. That was the thing the police noticed the moment they saw him the first time, is he had blood on him.
And note that if you're listening to Pervis's story, he never describes blood on the man he claims to have run from Sharice's apartment. And so it's really interesting that the defense is saying, if this is the guy, you would have seen a lot of blood on him. Yet their own guy is saying, I saw the guy who did it. Didn't see any blood on him. So it's a bit of a tension there. Like, I agree that there should be blood on him. And guess what? The police who saw him did see blood. But what Pervis doesn't see on the alleged killer leaving Sharice's apartment was blood.
So the other thing that the defense points out is the police only photographed the palms of his hands. Now, the reason they would have done this would have been for cuts on his hands, but they didn't do a good job of looking under his cuticles, under his fingernails, that sort of thing. The defense notes that when his hands are photographed, there was no evidence of blood or anything along those lines. But remember, as Alice said, he ran. There would have been a lot of opportunity for him to clean up in between when he ran and when he was found. So it's not that surprising to me that the palms of his hands don't reveal a lot of evidence. And I just want to say, the criticism, I get it. It's a good defense criticism that the police didn't do X, Y, and Z. The thing about X, Y, and Z in this case is if the police had done it, I think it's just as likely that they would have discovered evidence of the crime as they would have discovered evidence that he wasn't involved. And this absence of evidence argument is a very popular one amongst the defense and innocence claims. And it's a good one because it is a mistake of the police. But it's not as convincing to me just because I don't know what they would have found if they had done a better job. And look, there are sort of, for me at least, there is a spectrum of argument. One is we shouldn't execute this guy because the police didn't do all these things they should have done. I am more convinced by that. I am more convinced by the argument of how can you execute this guy when they didn't even test underneath his fingernails? Maybe it would have found evidence that he did it, but maybe it would have found the opposite. Wouldn't you like to know that? That is more compelling to me in a don't execute the guy argument. But remember, this is a clemency argument. This is a exonerate him from this crime argument. And when you're making that, these types of claims, they carry less weight with me.
As we've said, it's all about storytelling. So the defense, if they're going to say that their guy didn't do it, they're also going to say who the alternate suspects are. And there are some. So one very good alternate suspect is Sharice's ex-husband, Kenneth Christopher. They said that Kenneth was a man of extreme violence who came from a family of extreme violence and that he had abused Sharice. The victim divorced Kenneth when he was convicted of aggravated assault, and that she had a new boyfriend, kind of setting up the story of motive for this ex-husband. Now, Kenneth was completing his prison sentence for assault at the prison farm at Fort Pillow on the day of the homicide. The farm was notoriously unsecure, had prisoners dispatched to work in the community, failed to take account during the day, and it was known that prisoners could walk off during the day so long as they were back by the evening count. Really quick on that. All great to know. This is really hard because the best alternative suspect, he sounds pretty good. Violent guy, motive, was divorced because he was abusive, and then now his ex-wife has a new boyfriend. All sounds great from motive-wise. Problem is, he was serving time in prison. And while they're making these arguments about this prison was unsecure, there is no evidence that that day it was unsecure for him, that he was on work release out in the community, that he didn't report back, that there was any sign of him potentially being out there. Now, let's say they had a record of him being, released for work that day. Then there might be some argument. Maybe there's no sign-in sheet. There's absolutely nothing. So generally arguing that this prison is insecure is like saying anything is possible. It could have been a Yeti. That's essentially what they're arguing, right? They're saying, well, you never know. He could have gotten out. He could have found a knife. He could have killed her and made it back with all that bloody mess that we've talked about and no one saw. We have no evidence of it, but it is a realm of possibility. And those realm of possibility arguments with no evidence don't rise to the level of reasonable doubt.
So 3 things. Number 1, if you're a history buff, Fort Pillow is the site of an infamous massacre in the Civil War. So I was interested by that. I don't know if you're interested by that or not, but I was. That's the first thing. Second thing, so Kenneth is the father of these children, both of whom were stabbed. Even if he was mad at Sharice, it's a little unclear why he would stab his own children. Now you may be saying, well, family annihilators, they do that. Okay. The third one, though, is a big one. Kenneth is white. And even Pervis says that the guy running by him right before he discovered the bodies was a black man. So you add the difficulty of this happening, the sort of implausibility of this guy leaving a prison farm to commit this murder. He also doesn't fit the description of the very person you're trying to exonerate as being the guy. So unfortunately, I think Kenneth is probably out. It's probably not him. Which brings us to the second possibility, which is that this is actually someone involved in the drug trade. So Pervis would claim, once again, that he's going up, he sees this man run past him. And he is not the only person to support this argument. So years after the murder, about 5 years after, there was another gentleman who lived in this area. His name was John Edward Williams. So this murder happened in 1987. In 1992, he would claim that he was around the area the day the incident occurred and that he saw Payne walk into the apartment building. And shortly thereafter, he saw another black male walk out of the building. He stated the man then got into a car and drove away. Soon after, he saw Mr. Payne running from the apartment building. Now, he said that he had seen this same black man come out of the building multiple times, and he stated that he would see both Sharice and this black man together on multiple occasions, and that at times they would get into arguments. And he stated that he knew that Sharice used drugs, and in fact, they would use drugs together. This is a fascinating moment in this case because deciding whether or not you believe this person, John Edward Williams, it's an important moment. One thing I'll note, his statement about the individual differs from Pervis's. Pervis says this man was running out of the building. He doesn't say that. He says he was walking out of the building. It is interesting, though, that he claims to have seen this man at the apartment complex before. It's also interesting that he claims to have used drugs with the victim before, and that he indicates that this person might have been a dealer. Now, he never attempts to identify who this person was, and frankly, I don't think he knows. He went on to say that the victim was a pretty big drug user. In fact, he had been involved in drug trafficking himself. He said that his brother had sold drugs both to the victim and had also sold drugs for him. And he said that Charisse owed money to some of these drug dealers. The idea being that she owed money to these drug dealers, and shortly thereafter, she was murdered. So the alternative theory here is she's buying drugs from this individual, and he murders her as a result.
So the drug use of Charisse is actually corroborated or admitted to, I don't know what you want to call it, by her ex-husband. Her ex-husband also said that she used drugs. And indeed, at the time of her death, Charisse did have methamphetamine and amphetamines found in her blood. Whether she used drugs or not, the next leap is a big one, is that she was in a drug trade, owed money, and was killed by drug traffickers, right? You can use drugs and not be the victim of a drug trafficking murder or hit. Again, this is kind of like the taking pictures with your face up, face down sort of thing. They're taking something and then extrapolating into an argument where there's kind of no link to that ultimate argument. And honestly, the fact that she had drugs in her system might actually go towards the fact that she was maybe getting high with Pervis that day or drinking with him, right? I mean, your defenses are down when you do have amphetamines, and maybe she knew this person to also be using, and so she's bored, she's with 2 kids, nothing else to do, sure, come on in, let's like both be high together. I don't know that to be the case, but like that's not great for Pervis's argument.
Look, and here's the thing about drug dealers. I'm not going to say they never kill anybody to make a point to other people. So, you might say, look, if someone owes you money and you kill them, you're never going to get the money. That's true. But on occasion, you kill somebody to make a point to everybody else. You don't pay me, this is what happens. But here's what drug dealers don't do. And prove me wrong. Drug dealers who are killing someone because they didn't pay a debt don't typically walk into someone's apartment and stab them multiple times in a bloody, vicious murder and then turn around and stab their very young children who are not witnesses. That is not typically what you do. And I think you'll be hard-pressed to find an example of that happening anywhere else. But you have to believe that. You have to believe this person not only wanted to make a statement, but did it in a way that would involve them stabbing some young children. Look, drug dealers, they're criminals. They're still human beings. Like, just because you're involved in crime doesn't mean you're fine with murdering babies, And that's what you have to believe here. To me, the husband works so much better because then you have the sort of family annihilator position, but there are all those obvious problems with that. The alternative suspects, to me, they just don't work.
And also, by the way, we unfortunately have dealt with drug trafficking, drive-by shooting, drug-related kind of murders or hits whenever there's like a drug trafficking organization involved. I'm not saying they don't, but this is a very brutal, extended stabbing of 3 people and a rape, by the way, which takes time. Typically, the hits that we see for owing money reasons is like a drive-by shooting, right? Where you make a point, and if a kid dies, it's because the kid is in the car and is like an innocent bystander and gets a stray bullet. But there's typically not a lot of time because you're getting in, you're getting out, because there's usually people watching and you don't want to be caught at the scene. So we're talking about an extended time that this killer was in the apartment, not just to stab 3 people multiple times, but to go through the effort of raping Charisse as well before leaving. Doesn't look like your typical hit based on owing money for drugs. And basically, just so you know, these are the arguments the defense made, but what the evidence in the record is that, sure, they're able to show that Charisse used drugs and had drugs in her system at the time of death. What they were not able to show was any link to drug dealers, Leroy Jones's brother, Charles Jones, or any other person who she owed money to. So there's no other testimony as to her having money troubles for drug purposes. So that, again, is a huge leap. There's no evidence to link that particular theory.
It's that time of year. Kids are going back to school, and soon you won't be able just to yell down the hall to get in touch with them. You'll want to coordinate pickups. You'll want to be able to have your kids at a moment's notice. How do you do that? Well, a lot of times it's going to be a cell phone. But the problem with cell phones is you worry about who your kids are talking to. You worry about what they're accessing on the internet. That is where Gab comes in. And right now, Gab is having a back-to-school sale just for parents like us who are worried about what their kids are doing on the internet. Gab is the leader in safe smartphones and watches for kids, teens, and tweens. With no social media apps, no internet browser, and GPS tracking, Gab devices were built from the ground up specifically for kids and teens and are the way to keep your kids safely connected. Kids get unlimited talk and text with Gab Messenger, the first messaging and video calling app designed with kids' safety as the top priority. They block high-risk messages and content with nudity from ever reaching your child's phone. The app is exclusive to Gab phones, and it has a parent companion app for easy controls and to keep parents informed.
You know, we always talk about on our shows our experience as prosecutors and how we have seen online predators prey on children through social media, through smartphones. And Gab is really the answer to fight against the proliferation of those predators. As a parent, I am very worried about this, and I was so glad to hear that Gab is now on the scene. It gives you a peace of mind while staying connected with your kids. Because the truth is, I want to know where my kids are. I want to be able to reach them, and now I can. And if you have their watch, they even have a focus mode that helps kids focus during school hours so they're not distracted by the screen they have on their watch. That's why I really think Gab is a must-have this year, and I can't recommend enough that you and your family give them a try and do it now. Because right now, Gab is offering huge discounts on phones and watches to new customers. The best part? There's no contract required. Just go to gab.com/prosecutors to get started. That's Gab, GABB.com/prosecutors. Gab.com/prosecutors. Terms and conditions apply. Guys, it's that time of year. Shifting my wardrobe from summer to fall is always a challenge. Luckily, Quince offers timeless and high quality items I adore, ensuring my wardrobe stays fresh and I don't blow my budget. Like cashmere sweaters from $50, pants for every occasion, and get this, washable silk tops. And so much more. You guys know that I'm an attorney during the day and I travel a lot, meaning these washable silk tops are so easy to bring along. They don't wrinkle. They look so professional in every situation. I can wear them to court. I can wear them out to dinner at night. And the best part, all Quince items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands. And they do this by partnering directly with top factories. Quince cuts out the cost of the middleman and passes the savings on to us.
Make switching seasons a breeze with Quince's high-quality closet essentials. Go to quince.com/prosecutors for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/prosecutors to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/prosecutors. So let's talk about intellectual disability. Now, this is an area where I think the defense has a better argument, but once again, this really goes to punishment. The defense claims that Payne has an intellectual disability. He has a reported IQ of 72. They claim that when accepted norms are applied, Mr. Payne has a functioning IQ of 68. Now, this is important for a reason, because 70 is sort of your go-by. Above 70, we typically say that person is not intellectually disabled. Below 70, we tend to say that they are. Now, even that is a stretch, because although 70 is a marker, something to consider, the Supreme Court and the courts that looked at this always look beyond that. They look at your ability to sort of manage in life as to whether or not you can understand the consequences of your actions. I mean, look, basically, we don't say this, but it's almost like a version of insanity. It's this idea that if your IQ is too low, your ability to regulate your own conduct, to understand the difference between right and wrong, is lessened. And because of that, we don't necessarily want to apply the harshest penalty to you. So this normally comes in when we're talking about the death penalty. And in fact, Payne would benefit from this. His death penalty was eventually overturned on the basis of his IQ. According to the defense, Mr. Payne, he exhibits significant deficits in all the sort of various areas that we look at to determine whether or not someone is intellectually disabled. Now, the difficulty here is always that if someone tells you, I'm going to do this IQ test on you, and your defense attorney has told you, oh, by the way, if you do really well on this, they're going to execute you. If you don't, maybe you won't be executed. The temptation to malinger is strong. So that is always something that I think is difficult to deal with. I think it's interesting that Payne consistently tested above 70. Never tested very high, but we're talking 74, 73, 72 consistently. But despite that, eventually he was granted some relief because of his intellectual disability.
And by the way, because of the potential for malingering, maybe it's even subconscious malingering. That's why it's not just based on a number. And that number is subjective to some degree, right? It's based on a test, and you can test with different outcomes each time. That's why there's other things you look at, like your behavior, whether it manifests before you're the age of 18, things that you can't kind of make up. Now, despite the doctors finding Payne to be intellectually disabled, even the corrected IQ of 73 is above the standard of 70 in Tennessee law. And the defense also cites one of Payne's classmates and two of his teachers in support of the contention that he is intellectually disabled. They said Denise Giles was a classmate of Mr. Payne's from kindergarten through 7th grade. Miss Giles tutored Mr. Payne and other remedial students. Miss Giles reports that Pervis could not read, diagram sentences, or spell. In 7th grade, Mr. Payne was reading at a 1st or 2nd grade level. He could not sound out a word, but knew simple cats like cat and dog. He did not understand when to use the PH sound and when to use F, or when to use C rather than the use of K. He had a hard time grasping even simple concepts. Mr. Payne's 9th grade English teacher, Mary Williams, stated that Mr. Payne was not a good reader. He had poor comprehension and writing skills. His spelling was atrocious. And then yet another teacher, Martha Fane, Pervis's 10th grade science teacher, described him as intellectually disabled. So, according to the defense, these two teachers and a classmate show that he's intellectually disabled. Note that he's a really bad student. That's what they've testified to. Unfortunately, if you look at the reading level of students today, many of them fall under these atrocious levels of reading at 5, 6, 7, 8 grade levels below what they should be reading at. So what they are testifying to is him being a very poor speller, very poor student, and actually, if you note, mostly to do with like the reading portion, the language portion. They haven't really talked about math. Other things could actually lead to that result, right? For example, you could have dyslexia, which is not an intellectual disability. It's a way that your brain flips words that doesn't have to do with your IQ. That's why when the Supreme Court or courts look at your functioning, they're typically looking at if you can do simple tasks like take care of yourself, hygiene, taking showers, cook for yourself, know how to properly lock doors at night, things like that to help you function in society rather than if you can phonetically spell phonetic with an F or a PH.
Yeah. And so that sort of is the argument for the defense. All those things together. And just to wrap it up, the argument for the defense is, look, it was the 80s, small towns in Tennessee. There was a lot of racism. There was a tendency to jump to conclusions when you have a black man accused of raping and murdering a white woman. Pervis was in the wrong place at the wrong time. He just so happened to get there right as the real murderer, who also was a black man, as an aside, was leaving. He had no history that would support him doing this, and he has been a model prisoner since then. There's nothing in his life afterwards that would support that he did this. And so the most likely scenario is that he got there, he got some blood on him because he was trying to help. That was used against him, and he's actually innocent. That is the argument for his innocence. The things that I have trouble with, I don't think there's enough time for Pervis's story to have happened, because the witness who called 911, she heard when this murder was occurring. She called 911 as the murder was occurring, and the police officer who responded was there within a couple of minutes. Not long at all. Assume he misestimates. It took him 4 minutes or 5 minutes, right? Whatever. You have to believe that Pervis shows up to this scene. The real murderer has done all the murdering. The call has already been made. He's cleaned up or whatever. The things that the witness is hearing, he's done all that. He comes down the steps, walking, according to the one witness who supports Pervis. He comes walking down. He sees Pervis. Pervis goes up. He's going to his girlfriend's place once again to see if she was there. She's not there. He notices the door is open. He hears a child crying. He goes inside. He finds the scene. He finds Charisse on the ground. He removes the knife. He goes to the kitchen sink several times because he's getting sick. He may throw up. He checks on the other kids. He does all these other things. He makes a phone call. He picks up the phone to make a phone call. He does all these things, then leaves. He does all that in a matter of minutes, very few minutes. He does all that. He happens to run into a cop right as he leaves. Even though he says he wanted to seek help, rather than seeking help, he takes off running. He's found hiding somewhere later on, and he's arrested. You have to believe all that. You also have to believe that the police, upon arriving, decided they saw some beer cans in a bag at another door. Now, think about this for a second. They don't know who Pervis Payne is. All they know is we saw a dude walking down the steps and he ran. But maybe that dude who we saw, maybe he owns those beer cans. Who can say, right? And they decide to take the beer cans inside, set them up so that it looks like he had been in the room. They find a hat. Isn't it fortunate that that just so happened to be Pervis's? They take that hat, they set it up just perfectly to frame him, and thank goodness, at the end of the day, it turned out to be his hat. So thank goodness we can frame him using this. They do all these things to frame him, and it just all works out. And they manage to frame him. The other person, somehow, they didn't leave any evidence of their presence in the room, and they escaped, and they went forward to live their lives. I think that is a really difficult thing to believe. I think it is very hard to believe that. I think a lot of this claim is based purely on racism. They might have all been a bunch of racists, right? They might have been that. But I would caution people, when you have claims of racism, the point of that is to short-circuit your brain. It is to make you stop thinking logically and reasonably and to rely on emotion. And you hear that and you're like, wow, bunch of racist cops. He's a black man. They probably framed him. I'm not saying you shouldn't at least consider that option when you find out that there are a bunch of racist cops. You absolutely should. But just because there are a bunch of racist cops doesn't mean they framed him. And I think there's a lot of emotion on this case. I think a lot of this is based on that. And I think, frankly, Pervis Payne may be a wonderful person when he's not on cocaine. But I think that day he was on cocaine. And I think this happened because of that, and that's why the murder occurred, and he is most likely guilty.
Yeah, Brett, I think you hit the nail on the head. And here's the thing. We spent an entire episode, nearly an hour and a half, talking about the clemency, innocence claims, and the defense argument, because we really did want to flesh out everything, that their best arguments. But in this particular instance, despite the fact that he seems to have pretty loud people in his camp for innocence, I don't think this is a close case. And this, unfortunately, has kind of become the trumpeting case for racism and how racism can blind police, law enforcement in their investigations. Look, as someone who grew up in like the deep South from an immigrant family who didn't speak English until I was 7 years old and regularly was called Ching Chong and had my hair pulled out of my head because I was the only Asian student in my class, I totally understand racism. I've lived through it, and I think it is very, very real, and it is also a very serious thing to allege. And I think when you have a case where the evidence so clearly points to Pervis's guilt, completely diminishes real claims of racism. So I do think racism is real. There are real cases that should be looked at because of racism. I don't think this is the case for it. And to pour more resources and more media attention and more voices behind it to trumpet that this is kind of the case of what happens when racism is at play actually hurts cases in which racism may have had a role. And honestly, the interesting thing here is they had these really long clemency petitions. There are all these arguments about losing evidence or not preserving evidence. But in no way was there actually any evidence that this particular law enforcement department was racist towards Pervis, towards the Black community. There's nothing of that sort. And this entire department really has been under attack in more recent years for being racist because of this case. When we see bad acts by people who should be wearing the white hat, we need to call it out. Absolutely. But I think when you sound the dog whistle at all times, there's a reason there is the parable of the boy who called wolf. I absolutely want racism called out when it is appropriate, but when we call it in every single case, it loses its meaning, it loses its force, and we're really hurting people who are actually facing racism. And in this case, the evidence just seems incredibly clear that Pervis brutally stabbed 3 people that he probably barely knew, 2 of whom were young children who could do him no harm, who could not testify against him. And even though the one child ultimately survived, their life was completely ruined. There's no taking back of what's happened. And I do commend the people who are looking for actual innocence claims or wrongful convictions. But as we've said before, and we're the first to call out when we think a case is a wrongful conviction. I mean, we will throw everything behind it because we as prosecutors, we as citizens of this country don't want that to be the case. But when you see a clear, correct conviction, justice needs to be served here. And we don't need to waste resources that could be better directed elsewhere.
And I think one of the hardest things to do, I think it is probably the case that Pervis Payne is generally a nice guy. I think he probably is not the kind of person who would do something like this in ordinary circumstances. If you take away the drugs and everything else, he probably wouldn't do this. And I think one of the things in true crime that we face so often is we get to know these people. We get to know the accused, and we assume that because we know them and they're not monsters, that they couldn't have done this. And we forget that so many murders are committed by people who are not monsters. We want to believe that murders are committed by heinous, depraved psychopaths. Most people who kill people are not psychopaths. They are not. And do I think it was the right call not to execute him based on everything we've talked about? Probably. I think his intellectual disability combined with a few other things tell me this is not a good case of the death penalty. Do I think he's guilty? Absolutely. I think he's absolutely guilty. Do I think he's likely to reoffend if he's released? No, because I think a lot of things happen that came together to create this circumstance. And I think we in the true crime community, we love black and white. We want them to be absolutely evil. We want people to either be Chris Watts evil, right? Or Leo Schofield innocent. That's what we want. That we want that to be the world. That is not the world. The world is so much in between. And Pervis Payne is in between. And you might talk to Pervis Payne right now and think, there is no way this guy could have done something like that. And the man that Pervis Payne is today probably couldn't have. But that doesn't mean it didn't happen in 1987 or whatever it was. And we have to remember that, and we have to look at the evidence, because the evidence doesn't lie. The evidence isn't influenced by emotion. It just is what it is. And in this case, I think the evidence that you can't change and you can't plant tells you that he did this. And at the end of the day, I think he's guilty, and I don't think he should be exonerated. And I think if he were exonerated, that would be such an insult to the victims. Should he be released? Fine. I don't have a problem with that. That's the sentencing scheme in Tennessee. So be it. But he should not be exonerated. He should have to carry this with him for the rest of his life. The Prosecutors is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Most of you listening right now are probably multitasking. Yep, while you're listening to us talk, you're probably also driving, cleaning, exercising, or maybe even grocery shopping. But if you're not in some kind of moving vehicle, there's something else you can be doing right now. Getting an auto quote from Progressive Insurance. It's easy, and you could save money by doing it right from your phone. Drivers who save by switching to Progressive save nearly $750 on average, and auto customers qualify for an average of 7 discounts. Discounts for having multiple vehicles on your policy, being a homeowner, and more.
So just like your favorite podcast, Progressive will be with you 24/7, 365 days a year, so you're protected no matter what. Multitask right now. Quote your car insurance at Progressive.com to join the over 28 million drivers who trust Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates, national average 12-month savings of $744 by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive between June 2022 and May 2023. Potential savings will vary. Discounts not available in all states and situations. This episode of The Prosecutors is brought to you by Huggies Little Movers. Huggies knows that babies come in all shapes and sizes, and their tushies do too. Huggies Little Movers with its curved and stretchy fit. Moms know that there's nothing worse than an ill-fitting diaper, especially for your active babies. I love Huggies because I can rely on them to keep my baby covered while she moves around. You guys have heard about my sweet little baby. She just turned 1, deep into mobility. I am so excited about Huggies Little Movers because she can roll around, jump around, climb, which is everything she's doing. And I know that she is covered, and so am I in the cleanup.
And we all want the very best for our babies, and that's Huggies. Huggies Little Movers are curved, so babies feel comfy no matter how much they're moving around. And they're moving around a lot. They also offer up to 12-hour protection against leaks, which is a game changer. Get your baby's butt into Huggies Little Movers. We got you, baby.
And one thing to learn from this case, unfortunately something that we see all too often, people who have no criminal histories and who are perfectly nice, except when they're on substances, or maybe for the first time because it's the first time they shot up on cocaine and they never shot up before. They always snorted it, for example, and it hit their system differently, or it was a different grade of cocaine that they got that day. Any one of us, you or me, and this is really hard to admit, are capable of the most heinous of crimes in a particular situation. I don't want to admit that about myself, but we've seen it too many times, where just about anyone who's committed a heinous crime, you can find someone in their life, usually their mother, who will say, this person is incapable. It is impossible. It is not within the realm of possibility in this entire universe that this person could ever do something like that. And the answer is, yeah, we can, because we're fallen and we're incredibly broken, and our minds, especially under duress or substances, are able to do things that we never thought possible. So that's a really sad, hard lesson, and I wish it were not true, but Pervis' story and many others like his show us that it is possible.
Yeah, you know whose mother thought he was innocent until the moment he admitted that he did it? Ted Bundy. Mama's always going to believe you. Like, if you say you're innocent and you didn't do it, Mama's always going to believe you. And that's great. Doesn't mean you're innocent.
Thank God for moms, but
thank God
also
for moms. Exactly.
Oh, that was super depressing, Brett. Well, I really appreciate Christ Presbyterian Academy bringing this case to our attention. Loved our dialogue with them. And, you know, this is a tough case because it touches upon an entire community. And like we said, very important issues are raised post-conviction that I just don't think this is the right case for. With all that said, are we going to do a question today, or should we just
We
sign
are
off?
definitely doing questions today.
Okay, because this is so
If you're up for
depressing.
'em. Yeah.
Let's do some questions.
And I just want to say to the kids we talked to, I know you guys, you really looked into this case and you've got some strong feelings about it. Just because we disagree with you does not mean we're right. You guys may know this case better than we do. But the thing I would say is just stick to the facts. Stick to the facts. Don't be misled, and try and reach truth for yourself, because truth exists. It is real. Someone murdered these people, and that person needs to be held accountable. And you can figure out who did it. So keep digging would be what I would say to anyone who's interested in this case or any other case. Okay, Alice. So I'm going to take you as far from murder and mayhem as you could possibly be. She Who Yawns wants to know, what is your favorite Christmas dessert?
Oh my, that's like so broad because there's like Christmas dinner, but then like the Christmas season of like Christmas cookie exchanges. Oh man. Okay, well, so I think I said this before. I'm not a huge pie fan. I'm a huge sweets fan, but I just don't love pies. I think it's a very American thing that I just didn't grow up eating, so I'm not used to them. But boy, do I love me a good Christmas cookie exchange, because you get all the different types of cookies, like the thumbprint cookies, anything with chocolate, triple chocolate fudge, chocolate and mint. I know a lot of people don't like that combination. I think it is the most joyous combination of all time. And at Christmas time, that's when you get the Christmas mint M&Ms, and Christmas chocolate mint deliciousness is what I love. So anything with chocolate and mint is my jam. And I have now weaseled my way into like 3 or 4 Christmas cookie exchanges. I don't think they know I'm a part of other ones. I just want all the cookies in the world.
Can I just say, I love many things, but there is one thing that I hate with a burning passion, and that's chocolate and mint.
Are you
Can't
serious?
Stand it. I would rather die 1,000 deaths.
You're
than
kidding.
eat
I didn't know
chocolate
this
and
about you.
mint.
We can't be friends. Friendship over, podcast over.
I mean, it makes me want to gag. When I accidentally eat chocolate that has mint in it, I just want to die. I love chocolate and I love mint, but when you put the two together, disgusting. Just absolutely awful.
I didn't know that this was a taste for people. I didn't know this was an offensive taste to people until very late in life. I'm talking in my 30s. And when someone was like, oh, I don't like chocolate mint, I literally guffawed, and I thought they were kidding, because I thought it was one of those things where it's like, everybody loves chocolate, for example.
Yeah.
So I just want to say, I think you're super weird. I'm not I think we can be friends because it means you will give me all your chocolate mint, right?
Yeah, oh, I absolutely will. And those of you out there, stand with me together.
But like
We
Thin
will
Mints,
conquer.
Girl Scout cookies, isn't that like one of the
Disgusting.
most popular selling cookies of all
Disgusting.
time? And can I tell you what I even do? At Christmas time, I buy extra of the chocolate mint M&Ms because they only come out at Christmas, I think.
Disgusting.
And I store them so I can have them. And the little Hershey Kisses with the mints,
So
the peppermint.
gross.
Oh, so good.
Like, why would you ruin good mint and good chocolate by putting them together?
It's like a delight in your mouth. It just stays with you.
No. No.
So what is your favorite?
I mean,
then?
I don't like chocolate gravy either. Like, why would I like chocolate and mint? It's just gross. So for Christmas, there's a few things I love that are Christmassy. Number one, and this is sort of a cultural thing. Like, I'm not sure if the things that I associate with Christmas are actually Christmas. One of them, though, I love eggnog. I love eggnog. I don't know if eggnog is considered a dessert, but I love it. Eggnog with like... That's a great point, Sophie. This is coming full circle.
Sorry, Sophie, I had to highlight that awesome comment.
I called Alice mint at the beginning. I didn't call her chocolate mint, though.
Full circle.
Anyways, eggnog with some bourbon is just amazing. Good eggnog, it's hard to beat.
And here's
So another
the weird
thing I
thing.
like-
I don't like eggnog. Like the fact that it's made of eggs.
Okay, anyways.
And again, this is not something I knew that people liked until I was well into my 30s.
So, red velvet cake. I love red velvet cake. Do you like red velvet cake?
Of course. 'cause
Is that
it's
a Christmas
chocolate.
thing for you?
Well, I didn't know it was a Christmas thing. I guess it makes sense because it's red. But my mind was blown when I watched one of those cooking shows and realized red velvet was just chocolate.
It's
and I was
just
like,
chocolate.
wow, of course I love it. It does taste different because it's not brown.
I know.
Doesn't it taste
color,
different?
yes, absolutely it does.
It totally
Yeah.
messes with my brain.
No, 100%. And then pecan pie, which you can have anytime, but oftentimes you have at
With ice
Christmas.
cream. With ice cream,
with
right?
ice cream. And if you can get a pecan bourbon pie, oh, God, so good. So good. Now, I have a friend who's a complete loser and doesn't listen to the podcast, so he won't be offended by this. But he makes like classic figgy pudding, like English figgy pudding, which basically you make right after Thanksgiving, and then you let it marinate for a month, and then you eat it, which sounds absolutely disgusting to me. And that's like his big Christmas thing. He's very proud of it. Gross. Disgusting. I don't love that at all.
I don't think I actually know what figgy pudding is, but I saw a recipe for it once, and I was like, nope, no thanks.
Yeah, no thanks. No thanks. So anyways, I'm going to go with, for my answer to the question,
You've answered a lot of it.
If I have eggnog and a piece of pecan pie with maybe a red velvet cake, I love that.
That's quite the. I like that. You're making me kind of want Christmas right now.
Okay.
Well, that was a good way to kind of debrief this past hour.
I was going to ask another question, but if you don't want to.
Okay, sounds good.
This one is directed at me, so you don't necessarily have to say much, but this is from KPL 1960. And KPL 1960 wants to know, Brett, what is your military background? You kind of hinted at clearances that you have held. So, I have no military background. I attempted to join the Navy once. And, I did the interview. I was going to be a Navy JAG. I filled out the application. I did the interview. I got into great shape. I was the best shape I've ever been. I mean, I could run forever, and I was doing sit-ups and push-ups and all this stuff. I was in great shape. I was really committed to this. I really wanted to be in the Navy. I really wanted to join the Navy. And I went down for an interview in Pensacola, and I did the whole thing. And then they were like, you'll hear back within a couple weeks. A couple weeks passed, didn't hear anything. 4 weeks passed, didn't hear anything. 2 months passed, didn't hear anything. Finally, I called and was like, hey. And they're like, oh, if you didn't hear anything, they didn't select you. So basically, I am a loser who got rejected, was not good enough
I ask an
for
honest
Navy
question?
JAG. Absolutely.
This is not meant to be a dig on you, but it's going to be a dig. I thought they're like desperately recruiting. Why did they reject you?
I don't know. I may have felt the same way. I might have been a little cocky. This might have been put Brett in his place moment, because I just assumed if I wanted to join the Navy and be a JAG, I would be able to do it. Apparently not.
You got ghosted by the Navy.
I did. I got ghosted by the Navy.
You know what? They're lost. They're lost,
so
Brett.
badly. I was so excited to do it.
I also wanted to be a JAG, but for like less noble reasons, because they help pay for your law school, and I was really poor, and I really wanted to do it, but I ultimately didn't do it because I didn't want to get in physical shape.
I just felt this, like, I have been blessed so much by this country. Like, I want to give back, and I wanted to give back to my country. I had just finished clerking for a district judge and a circuit judge, and I'm like applying to be a naval JAG. And it was so funny because I went down to the interview and they were like,
you're like really qualified.
Do you really want to do this?
Oh, maybe they thought you were just going to leave.
Yeah, they were like, if you do this, you'll be the very bottom of the totem pole. Like you'll be answering to people who don't have anywhere near as good as resumes. And I was like, absolutely, I'm fine with that. I want to do that. Yes, I will salute people. like I am fine with that. I want to do that. I was totally into it. I mean, I was completely committed. My wife at the time, she wasn't my wife, but she was like, they're going to send you to some random place. I'm never going to see you again. I was like, it's fine. We'll figure it out. Like I was all about it.
Maybe it saved your marriage and you didn't even know it.
It may have.
This is one of those like Ghosts of Christmas Past, where if you saw another life, it would have been like you wouldn't even be with Mrs. Brett,
Yeah. I mean, it could. I mean, look, my position is always that when I had my children, there are two moments in my life when I said everything I've ever done was the right thing. Two moments. The first was when I got into Harvard. So when I got into Harvard, I just felt like every decision I've ever made was the correct decision because I got into Harvard. I'm going to Harvard. What more could I have done? I clearly made all the right calls, right? That was a great moment.
You could have gone to Yale, but it's okay. Keep going.
Well, yeah, whatever. So then the second moment was when I held my daughter in my hands and I thought everything that's ever happened in my life came up to this moment, right? And if he's listening in the future, obviously when I held my son in my hands, thinking the same thing, right? But I mean, seriously, like everything that ever happened in your life led me to where I am now. So what is a mistake? What is like a whatever? Like I didn't get in the Navy. Big whoop. I got to where I am, and that's what matters. So I'm fine with it. But nevertheless, wonder sometimes why I didn't get in the Navy. But to answer your question about the clearances, I don't know why I have these clearances.
Just to be clear, Brett and I had the same clearances. I just don't brag about it because you're not supposed to brag about it, Brett.
So I don't know why I have all these clearances. I know all these things I know. And it's just weird. The answer is, I don't know. But it wasn't because I was in the military, because they rejected me. So here I am. All right. Well, it's been great doing this podcast with you guys. I hope you all have great lives. Maybe in the next life I'll see you again. But until then, I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are the prosecutors. Hot time. Summer in the city.
Yeah. Happy almost Memorial Day. Where did I put? There's my water. Sorry.
It is almost Memorial Day.
Couldn't find my water.
Everybody needs a stiffy. Let's see.
Justine had a kid get stuck in a chair. My kid and the kid that was obsessed with Squanto for like 8 months, he's newly obsessed. Like, I mean obsessed with the Titanic. Except
I love Titanic.
His Titanic doesn't sink. And he gets very mad when you talk about the Titanic sinking. And so he has turned his room into a Titanic.
Every night. Every night in my dreams.
You are really giving Celine Dion a run for her money.
I see.
Anyways,
that is how I
he's
know
gonna keep
you.
singing, but this Titanic thing is like becoming a thing because he has to wear a boat captain hat all the time, and you know.
Sci-fi fans, this is your summer. Pluto TV Summer of Cinema is bringing you a universe of free sci-fi movies. Discover new futures with The Matrix and World War Z. Host Alien Explorers with Arrival. Or beam up to Journey the Galaxy with Star Trek Beyond. The sun never sets in outer space. Or on streaming hundreds of free sci-fi movies when you download the Pluto TV app now. Pluto TV Summer of Cinema. Stream now, pay never.